Tonight, this video showing another deadly U.S. military strike against a boat allegedly smuggling drugs to the U.S.
4.4 tons of cocaine, which was destined for Europe, was dug up from a number of pits near an illegal airstrip.
A silent speedboat raced across the Caribbean, carrying over 4,000 pounds of pure cocaine, worth more than $300 million on U.S. streets. But what the smugglers didn't know: a helicopter sniper was already locked onto their twin engines, and federal agencies were closing in from air, sea, and satellite. One wrong move and a single shot would change everything. What followed became one of the largest drug seizures in maritime history. You won't believe how it ended. The $300 million shipment. The intercept that changed everything. 6 months before that helicopter unleashed disabling fire, FBI agents in Miami uncovered intelligence that would lead to one of the largest drug seizures in maritime history. A single shipment worth $300 million on American streets. Wiretaps revealed the Sinaloa cartel was significantly expanding maritime operations, with intercepted communications referencing major investments in go-fast boat infrastructure along Colombia's Pacific coast. Intercepted communications reference the fast ones, go-fast boats launching from Colombia's Pacific coast, each loaded with over 4,000 pounds of pure cocaine. When investigators pulled the technical details, they understood why stopping these boats would require more than standard patrol operations. Go-fast boats are purpose-built trafficking platforms constructed from lightweight fiberglass and powered by twin outboard engines generating 900 combined horsepower. They hit speeds exceeding 50 miles per hour on open water while running completely dark, no lights, no identification transponders. And a radar signature so minimal that standard maritime surveillance routinely misses them. Crews operated in shifts under strict radio silence, rationing fuel precisely to reach transfer points in international waters where other vessels would take the load north. The numbers behind this operation were shocking. Intelligence indicated the cartel was preparing to launch a boat carrying 4,475 pounds of pure cocaine, over 2 tons. At wholesale prices, approximately $100 million. However, once cut and distributed into more than 6 million individual doses, the street value would exceed $300 million. If this shipment made landfall, it would vanish into domestic networks within hours. Overdose rates would spike across multiple states as dealers flooded markets with product sourced directly from this run. The cartel would collect a 9-figure payday, and the smugglers would disappear before federal agents could trace a single connection. The FBI had the intelligence, projected routes, launch windows, and vessel characteristics, but could not stop a speedboat moving at such speed across thousands of square miles of ocean. They needed aviation assets, long-range surveillance, and strike capability that only 2 other agencies possessed. Intelligence confirmed the boat was being prepared for launch. The window to act was closing fast. Within hours, 3 federal agencies began coordinating what would become one of the most sophisticated maritime interdictions ever executed in the Western Hemisphere. Building the strike force. When 3 agencies become one weapon. Intelligence confirmed the boat was being loaded in Colombia. The FBI had perhaps 72 hours before launch. A go-fast boat moving at 50 miles per hour across the open ocean could reach transfer points before federal forces assembled. They needed partners with reach, and they needed them immediately. A joint task force formed around one objective: intercept the cocaine shipment in international waters before it reached the American coastline. The FBI had intelligence but no maritime capability. The Navy had destroyers, radar systems, and helicopters capable of covering massive ocean areas, but lacked law enforcement authority on the high seas. Only the Coast Guard possessed the legal power to stop, board, and arrest in international waters. The solution was Coast Guard law enforcement detachments, LEDETs. These small teams deploy aboard Navy vessels and provide the legal authority necessary for drug interdiction operations. With a LEDET aboard, a Navy destroyer gains federal law enforcement standing, transforming military sensors and aircraft into authorized platforms for counter-narcotics missions. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer received orders to move toward the search grid. 9,000 tons equipped with Spy 1D radar monitoring a 360-degree bubble across over 100,000 square kilometers. Coast Guard fast response cutters pushed south at 28 knots, carrying tactical teams armed and trained for hostile vessel seizures. Above them, a Navy P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, a militarized Boeing 737 packed with synthetic aperture radar and high-resolution sensors, began scanning the projected smuggling corridor. The coordination was exact. The Navy would detect the threat. The FBI would confirm it matched their intelligence. The Coast Guard would execute the interdiction with legal authority and precision force. But while federal agencies synchronized their response, intelligence confirmed the cartel's go-fast boat had already launched from Colombia's coast. It was loaded with over 2 tons of pure cocaine and racing north at high speed, its crew believing the ocean's vastness would protect them. What they didn't know was that multiple federal agencies were already converging on their position with technology capable of tracking a single boat across thousands of square miles of open water. 200 nautical miles off Central America, Navy sensors were about to turn that assumption into a fatal miscalculation. Contact, locked and tracked. Finding a speedboat moving at 50 miles per hour across thousands of square miles of open ocean required the Navy's P-8A Poseidon, and at 0614 hours it found exactly what the FBI had predicted. The Poseidon's synthetic aperture radar, electro-optical cameras, and infrared sensors worked in combination to eliminate surface clutter and isolate fast-moving contacts. The FBI's intelligence provided specific parameters: no transponder, high speed, known trafficking corridor, launch window narrowed to a 6-hour block. When the radar team called out a contact bearing 270, range 15 miles, speed 50 knots, running completely dark with no identification signal, every parameter matched. Aboard the destroyer, the bridge crew immediately adjusted course. Below deck, Ledette personnel moved to stations. Inside the ship's hangar bay, the crew of an MH-60 Seahawk helicopter began pre-flight preparations alongside a team that would prove decisive, Hytron. The helicopter interdiction tactical squadron represents the Coast Guard's most specialized capability for stopping go-fast boats. These precision marksmen trained specifically to disable vessel engines from moving helicopters using carefully aimed rifle fire. The unit completed its 1,000th interdiction in August 2025, 26 years after its formation in 1999. In that time, Hytron has stopped more than $33 billion in narcotics from reaching American cities. That's an average of 1 interdiction every 9 days for over 2 decades, and this morning would add another to that count. Coast Guard fast response cutters closed from the east. Their tactical teams prepared for hostile boarding. The destroyer's radar continued tracking the target, feeding real-time position updates to all units. The P-8A Poseidon maintained altitude, its sensors locked on the small vessel still racing north at full speed. The smugglers had no idea they'd been detected. From their perspective, they were alone on an empty ocean, executing a route they'd run successfully before. What they couldn't see was the destroyer bearing down on them, cutters closing from multiple vectors, and a helicopter crew preparing for launch. The $300 million cocaine shipment they were transporting had just become the target of a coordinated federal strike involving assets worth hundreds of millions more. As dawn light spread across the Caribbean, Coast Guard lookouts aboard the lead cutter spotted what radar had been tracking: a white speedboat with twin engines and absolutely no intention of stopping. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button to help beat the algorithm. The chase, 50 miles per hour to nowhere. The moment the Coast Guard cutter rose over the horizon, the smugglers made their choice. They ran. Lookouts on the cutter's bow confirmed visual contact within minutes of dawn. A low-profile white speedboat, twin Yamaha outboards screaming, no flag, no markings. The cutter's bridge issued the standard hail over the marine radio. Unidentified vessel, this is the United States Coast Guard. Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded. The speedboat held steady for a handful of seconds. Then both throttles slammed forward. The twin outboards exploded to life, blasting columns of white water from the stern. The hull lifted, planed out, and surged past 50 miles per hour in seconds. Water erupted in twin rooster tails as the boat tore across the surface. The smugglers had decided distance was their only chance. The cutter responded immediately. From its deck, the crew launched a 26-foot over-the-horizon pursuit craft carrying a tactical interdiction team already strapped in and braced for violent seas. The smaller boat hit the water hard, slamming over waves as it accelerated after the fleeing vessel. Ahead, the smugglers began zigzagging at sharp angles. Each turn threw massive arcs of seawater high into the air as they tried desperately to break the pursuit vector. At 50 miles per hour, every maneuver risked capsizing, but panic had set in. Then the sound changed. From the destroyer's deck, the MH-60 Seahawk launched into the sky, its rotors hammering the water beneath it. The helicopter banked sharply and accelerated with speed the smugglers could never match. Within moments, it closed the distance that had taken the pursuit boat minutes to cover. The smugglers looked up, and whatever hope they'd held vanished the instant they saw that helicopter bearing down on them. Panic took full control. Panic drove them to stupidity. One smuggler ripped open the storage hatch and began hurling cocaine bricks into the sea. Each kilo was worth $30,000 wholesale. Splash. Another. Splash. Within 30 seconds, $6 million in product sank into water too deep to recover. But the engines stayed wide open. The throttles remained pinned. Distance was still their only option. Even as it became obvious there was nowhere left to run. $300 million in potential street value was racing across the Caribbean at maximum speed, and federal forces were closing from every direction. The Coast Guard pursuit craft stayed locked on their wake. Overhead, the Seahawk grew impossibly large, its rotor wash throwing a circular storm of mist across the water. The smugglers were running out of ocean, running out of options, and running out of time. The Seahawk closed to 50 yards, and inside that aircraft, a Hytron marksman steadied his rifle for a shot that would end this chase and secure the largest cocaine seizure of the year. Precision strike. The Hytron marksman's target wasn't the men aboard that speedboat. It was the twin engines screaming at full throttle, and federal law gave him exactly one way to stop them. The helicopter held position barely 50 yards above the fleeing vessel. Inside the cabin, the marksman lay behind a precision rifle mounted near the open door. His training had prepared him for exactly this scenario. One accurate round would end the chase. One misplaced shot could turn law enforcement into something worse. Federal interdiction doctrine required a progression of force. The cutter had already delivered visual signals and loud-hailer commands ordering the vessel to stop. When those were ignored, the Seahawk's door-mounted M240 machine gun swept a controlled burst across the bow, rounds stitched deliberately into empty water ahead of the boat. The message was unmistakable: stop now, or we escalate. The smugglers didn't stop. That left one authorized option: disabling fire aimed exclusively at the engines. Not the hull, not the crew. Only the mechanical components that keep the boat in motion. The order came through the helicopter's internal communications. Shooter, you are clear to engage. Engines only. The marksman made a fractional adjustment to his aim, compensating for the helicopter's vibration and the target's erratic movement. Through the scope, white engine cowling obscured by salt spray.
Some new video and details from the Coast Guard on a recent series of cocaine busts.
The boat zigzagged hard right. He compensated left, tracking the movement. Rotor vibration made his crosshairs dance. He exhaled half a breath and held it between heartbeats. Squeezed. 3/4 of a second later, the round punched through the starboard engine casing exactly on target. Sparks erupted, followed by a burst of flame and black smoke as the engine seized. The entire mechanism locked solid, propeller grinding to a halt. The boat lurched violently, losing half its thrust, but the port engine kept screaming, dragging the vessel forward in an awkward trajectory. The marksman shifted his aim half an inch. The second shot was fired. This round hit the port engine dead center, tearing through critical components. Metal fragments burst outward in a spray of shrapnel and smoke. The engine died instantly, its drive shaft locking with a violent shudder. The transformation was immediate.
13 of these strikes on alleged drug boats. The U.S. military says the 4 boats taken out in the latest strikes were known by U.S. intelligence.
The speedboat that had been tearing across the ocean at 50 miles per hour suddenly skidded sideways across its own wake, nearly capsizing before settling into a dead stop. From maximum speed to 0 in seconds, the vessel sat motionless on empty water, more than 200 miles from the nearest shore. Hundreds of millions of dollars in cocaine had just been immobilized by 2 precision rifle shots. The smugglers, who moments before had been running on adrenaline and desperation, now had nowhere to go. The Coast Guard tactical pursuit craft surged forward. Within minutes, the boarding team was alongside. What they found aboard that dead boat would become one of the largest single cocaine seizures in recent maritime interdiction history. The haul. 4,475 pounds of pure cocaine, at wholesale prices $100 million. On the street, after cutting and distribution, over $300 million. The moment the tactical team stepped aboard, both men surrendered. No weapons, no fight. The Coast Guard crew immediately began documentation. Every bale photographed, weighed, tagged with an identification code, and entered into the digital chain of custody system that would track it from seizure through prosecution. The sheer scale of the haul confirmed this wasn't a small operation. Over 2.2 tons of high-purity cocaine meant the cartel had invested heavily in this single run. After cutting and distribution across domestic networks, this load would produce more than 6 million individual doses. That's 6 million hits that won't reach American neighborhoods. 6 million opportunities for addiction interrupted before they start. Communities protected from the spike in violence that always follows when this much product floods local markets. But the dollar value told only part of the story. The real intelligence value came from what the smugglers carried. Their phones were seized intact. Call logs, GPS coordinates, encrypted messaging apps, and contact lists, all preserved exactly as found. Those devices would be turned over to federal analysts who specialize in reconstructing trafficking networks. Every saved number, every location pin, every message thread became a lead that investigators could follow deeper into the cartel's operation. The 2 smugglers were read their rights and transferred to federal custody.
Vessels were smuggling drugs from Venezuela and from Colombia, but officials in both countries, and many in Washington, are questioning whether that's true.
Given the quantity of cocaine and their operation of an unregistered vessel in deliberate evasion of law enforcement, both faced mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years, with the actual weight involved pushing potential sentences toward life in federal prison. The go-fast boat had cost the cartel approximately $500,000 to build. The precision rifle fire made it worthless. A shaped charge was placed against the hull. Within 60 seconds, the vessel folded and disappeared beneath the Caribbean. The cartel lost everything on this run. The intelligence moved fast. Within 2 weeks, data extracted from the smugglers' phones triggered 3 additional operations, resulted in 5 more arrests, and led to raids on 2 cartel safe houses across Central America. The $300 million seizure had become the opening thread in a broader investigation that would ultimately dismantle an entire trafficking cell. This is how you take down a criminal organization, not with one decisive strike, but with relentless pressure, operation after operation, until the network collapses under its own exposure. Every seizure creates more leads. Every arrest exposes more contacts. Every disruption weakens the cartel's ability to operate with confidence. The success came down to seamless coordination between agencies that turned thousands of square miles of ocean into a trap. The FBI's intelligence identified the threat. The Navy's sensors tracked it across impossible distances. The Coast Guard's legal authority and precision marksmanship ended it without loss of life. 3 agencies, 1 mission, and a $300 million cocaine shipment that never made it to American streets. But this seizure represents just one battle in a war that's been evolving for decades. And understanding why operations like this keep working reveals something cartels can't overcome, a technology gap they've spent billions trying to close. The arms race cartels can't win. For over 30 years, drug cartels have been trying to solve one problem: how to move cocaine across open water without getting caught. They've spent billions on the solution, and they're still losing. In the 1980s, cartels relied on go-fast boats, just like the one stopped in this operation.
15 people were arrested in the largest drug seizure under the current administration.
When those became too easy to detect, they shifted to semi-submersible vessels in the early 1990s, low-profile boats that sit just inches above the waterline, nearly invisible to radar. By the 2000s, they were building fully submersible narco-submarines capable of traveling completely underwater. Some of these vessels cost up to $4 million to construct and can carry 10 tons of cocaine across the Atlantic Ocean. The technology gap should favor the cartels. They have unlimited funding, access to engineers, and no legal constraints on what they build. Yet the interdiction rate tells a different story. The Coast Guard reports a success rate of 90% against go-fast boats once Hytron became operational in the late 1990s. Even against semi-submersibles, the hardest vessels to detect, interdiction rates in open water remain significant, with Joint Interagency Task Force South disrupting hundreds of attempts since 2006. The reason is simple: detection range. A cartel's speedboat moving at 50 miles per hour can cover an impressive distance, but a P-8A Poseidon flying at 30,000 feet can scan over 100,000 square kilometers in a single patrol. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer's radar can track contacts across that same massive area continuously. Once detected, a helicopter can close 20 miles in minutes. The ocean's size, which smugglers count on for protection, becomes irrelevant when federal sensors can monitor areas larger than entire states. Cartels understand this, which is why they keep innovating. In July 2025, Colombian authorities seized the first unmanned submersible drone, a remote-controlled vessel designed to eliminate the risk of crew capture. But even this adaptation doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Unmanned or not, the vessel still has to cross monitored waters, and every technological advance by traffickers is met with better radar, improved satellite surveillance, and tighter coordination between agencies. This creates a strategic problem cartels cannot solve through innovation alone. Maritime routes remain necessary because land borders are saturated with surveillance. But maritime interdiction forces them into an unwinnable arms race, where every adaptation is countered by technology they can't match and coordination they can't replicate. And that's exactly why operations like this $300 million seizure matter. Not because they stop every shipment, but because they prove that no matter how fast cartels run or how sophisticated their vessels become, the ocean has become the one battlefield where federal technology creates an advantage criminal organizations simply cannot overcome. Operations like this involve thousands of hours of work by people who rarely receive recognition. Intelligence analysts tracking fragmented communications, radar operators scanning empty oceans for hours, helicopter crews launching into uncertain conditions, and boarding teams facing unknown threats. Their work happens far from cameras and headlines, but it protects millions of Americans from narcotics that fuel addiction, violence, and death across communities already struggling with limited resources. Since Hytron's formation in 1999, the unit has completed over 1,000 interdictions and stopped more than $33 billion in narcotics from reaching American cities. The most recent milestone, interdiction number 1,000, occurred in August 2025, proving the threat remains constant and the response stays sharp. If this breakdown showed you something the mainstream media doesn't cover, subscribe right now to see more real federal operations. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.